Katie, I think you're gonna have screen share ability.
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect.
So we can start whenever you guys want, but I just want to make a quick announcement and say thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you for all of the ASDA District 2 alums who are here sharing their knowledge with us tonight. Being panelists and presenters, thank you so much, everyone, also for coming. And if you're not following ASDA District 2 on Instagram, please do so. So yeah, and I will turn it over. And thank you to our Professional Development Committee for putting this all together. So yeah. To you.
Want to make sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Humaira, and I am the Professional Development Chair. And we also have Adam, who's the Professional Development Associate. And thank you guys all so much for tuning in for our Residency 101 panel. So how this is going to work is Katie, who's one of our panelists, she's going to actually go through a short presentation on the whole process. And then we have a list of questions to sort of guide the conversation for all of our panelists. We'll also leave the chat open. So if you guys have any questions, just put them in there. And if we don't cover it during the presentation, we're going to get to that at the end. So before we begin, I just want to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. So Katie, if you want to start with where you're going and if you're doing GPR, specialty, AEGD.
Sure. So I'm Katie Rothas. I graduated in 2019 and I'm finishing my first year of my GPR. I have a 2-year program because it's a combined GPR Masters in Public Health program. So I just am finishing up my 1 year at Westchester Medical Center. And then starting July 1st, I'll be transferring over to the Phelps Open Door Clinics here up in Westchester County.
All right, Nancy, you go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I graduated a week ago, exactly. I will be moving to San Antonio to the University of Texas Health Science Center to be an AEGD resident.
Awesome. Jessie Begley? I hope I said that right.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Begley. I graduated with Nancy and Allison. I think that's it for my class last week. And I'll be going to Chicago to attend the orthodontics program at UIC.
Woohoo!
Next up, we have Allison DeRenzi.
Hi, guys. Like she said, my name is Allison. I graduated with Nancy and Jessie a week ago from Columbia, and I'm doing the 4-year OMFS residency at Rutgers in Newark, New Jersey.
And last but not least, we have another Alli Rascon.
Yes, thank you, Allison. That's a great name you have. But I usually go by Alli, and I graduated from NYU also a week ago, and I'll be attending University of Pennsylvania for the periodontics program.
Okay, thank you guys so much. Katie, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead with your presentation.
Absolutely. So some of my stuff does cover some of the questions that people submitted before today's presentation, but I will say that there are some things that I've covered in previous Residency 101 lectures that I just don't have time to cover in today's time frame, but I did include this slide so that when the presentation is sent out, there's actually some extra slides in the appendix that will help you through this process. But let's get going. So let's see. All right. I never know what, here we go. All right. So some people, you're coming on to, you're starting your D4 year and you're like, do I go to private practice or do I do a residency or an AGD? So these are some kind of questions. If you're thinking you want to do a residency, if you want an expanded skill set, if you want an opportunity to collaborate with dental students from other programs, if you want to learn some different techniques and use some different materials than you've used in dental school, improve your speed before you go into private practice or other type fields in dentistry, if you want additional mentorship, if you want to work on kind of different types of cases, a lot of times in dental school things get referred out to specialty programs. So this a residency gives you opportunity to work on a little bit more complicated procedures and treatment plans than you would in dental school. Also, if you're kind of unsure of whether you want to specialize, or you feel like, you know, you're coming upon your D4 year and you just don't think your resume or whatever is strong enough to apply to a specialty right away, you can do a 1-year GPR or AGD program before applying to a specialty residency. Okay. So some differences between an AGD versus a GPR. It's a very common question, and it's not often fully gone over. So typically an AGD program is based in a school, and versus a GPR is based in a hospital. Both of them oftentimes do have, are paid. AGD sometimes a little bit less as compared to a GPR. Both of them, you're going to be doing comprehensive dentistry in both programs. However, an AGD is a little bit more focused in general dentistry, whereas a GPR will have a more of a medical component to the program. So in addition, your patient population tends to be more medically complex. Oftentimes, you're going to be doing OR dentistry. You're also going to be on call in many of the programs and have that kind of experience doing a more of emergency dentistry. Some AGD programs you do kind of like an urgent care type setting on the weekends or in the evenings, depending on the program that you enter. Both of them though, you're going to be working on more complicated cases as well as having, more a larger patient volume. And both of them, you're going to have an opportunity to have some mentorship from an attending, rather than you just as if you were in private practice, kind of like running the show. So you do have that opportunity to learn more, to do more difficult cases, while also under the guidance of faculty members or attendings. But definitely a GPR, you definitely have that sense of being in a hospital. Whereas a GPR, sometimes an AGD, sometimes people say it's almost like an extra year of dental school with some more advanced cases in the way that they structure their programs. So it just depends on what you're looking for from a program. So for those of you who are considering specialty programs, there's a little bit of a difference between doing a specialty program in a hospital versus doing a school-based program. In a hospital, typically the number of slots available is a lot less as compared to school-based programs. There are only about 1 to 5 spots as compared to school-based, which is typically anywhere from 5 to 20 or more. In a hospital, you are paid to complete your program, whereas in a school-based program, you are paying an additional, just basically a tuition to complete the program. In particular for OMFS, a hospital program is only going to be 4 years, whereas school-based is going to be 6 years, where you have to go to medical school as well as then complete your hospital component of your residency. And then hospital programs, there oftentimes are requirements for citizenship. Some programs do not accept people who are not United States citizens. So you just be careful if you are someone who is technically an international student, even though you went through a 4-year program here in the States. If you're here on a student visa, just be careful when you're researching programs as to whether or not the program sponsors international students. And that goes for GPRs and AGDs as well. So oftentimes people are, this pass versus match, like what's the difference? What do you use them for? So I'm just going to go into that a little bit because certainly it wasn't very well explained when we were going through the process. So there are, regardless of whether you are in a program that does pass only or participates in the match, you will fill out the ADEA PASS application. However, those programs that only participate in pass, their applicants are typically offered a position 24 to 72 hours after they interview, and they have an option to accept. Whereas match day, you are matched, if your programs only participate in match, you rank your programs, and then on your match day, you are matched to one program. For match, also, you know, you can interview at several programs. You'll then rank your programs, and programs also rank you. And there's an algorithm that I'll go into a little bit more detail on how you get placed into a program. Also, the difference between those two, for programs that only are participate in PASS, their timeline is a lot sooner than programs that participate in match. At least for GPR and AGD programs. So those who are non-match, excuse me, their deadlines are typically in July, somewhere between July and October. And then those that participate in match will be somewhere. These include so for specialties who participate in match, their deadlines for applications are either between July and October, or they're somewhere in the November-December range. Depending on the type of specialty program you're going into, like endo versus prosto versus perio versus pedo versus OMFS, they all have very different timelines, which we'll get a little bit into in a future slide. It gets a little muddy, but fortunately the ADEA PASS application is very clear as to when you're applying to programs, what their deadlines are. So you can kind of, you know, get yourself organized once you open up the application. So preparing for your application, this is just a few things. Again, there's some things that I've gone over in past presentations that are in the appendix that I'm not going to go through today just because of time. So some people are asking about like just a general timeline. So this is if you're going through the 2021 cycle or a future cycle, like this is, you know, consider this January as January of 2020, and then this January over here as January of 2021. So up until, you know, now it's almost June. So at this point, the ADEA PASS application has already been opened. You know, if you're applying in future cycles, I suggest at the beginning, the January through, you know, the winter through the spring before your ADEA PASS application starts. You should start researching programs and making a list of programs that you want to apply to. If you plan on doing some kind of shadowing, a lot of GPR programs will allow you to do one-day shadows. Some say it's against their HIPAA violation. But if you consider, and if you're in a school that doesn't allow you to take time off from clinic to go and do shadowing or externships, I suggest using your, you know, days off that you already have incorporated into the school year. So if you think you wanted to do some shadowing days during your spring break, during that that winter period is a great time to start reaching out to programs to say, hey, I'm interested in shadowing. Also, if you're in a specialty program, a lot of specialty programs, the ADAT is still an optional thing, but if you're applying to programs where it's a requirement, I would say during, you know, your winter or spring of D3 is a good time to take the ADAT. You know, again, everybody's school year is structured differently, so you know when you have good times to dedicate to studying. So I would say, you know, it's always good to have those scores before you start the application process because things move pretty quickly for specialty programs during once the May application opens. So having that ADAT score already done, even if you want to do it sooner than your winter or spring, if you feel like you're going to have to take it again, you know, you schedule that accordingly. But definitely I would say have that ADAT done before May of your application cycle. And then it's also a good time to, you know, make sure your CV resume is up to date, start kind of brainstorming some ideas of what you want to include in your personal statement. Then I would say, you know, very sorry. This is mouse very sensitive. Once the application's open, again, it really depends on what kinds of programs you're considering and when your first deadline is. But you know, once that application's open in May, it's usually a good time to start reaching out for your professional evaluation forms and your institutional evaluation forms. So you typically need 3 professional evaluation forms, which will typically be, you know, from, you know, clinical faculty you've worked with or didactic faculty that know you well. And then your institutional evaluation form is typically completed by your dean. And every school kind of has a different process. NYU, we had to fill out like a very extensive questionnaire and then put in the deadline of our first program, and then the dean kind of created a timeline for themselves for writing all these letters based on when your applications were due. So the earlier you can get that process going, the better. As well as, requesting transcripts. There is this part where you have to request, unofficial transcripts from your undergrads, as well as having your, as much of an up-to-date dental school transcript as well. And, every school has different processes as far as requesting those. So again, earlier you can do that, the better. So it's just one thing less you have to worry about as your deadline gets closer. Like I said, specialty and non-match deadlines typically can be anywhere between July and October. Typically, again, specialty programs that, or even some of the match programs that have an earlier deadline, such as ortho, perio, pros, anesthesiology, and Canadian GPRs, typically will have deadlines in this range as well. And then interviewing again for some of the non-match and some of the specialty programs happen during this time. If you're going to do match GPR programs where their deadlines for applications aren't until November 1st or December 15th, then I would say during this kind of summer, early fall time is a good time to reach out to program directors to either try and do a shadow day during your summer break or sometime in the fall. Again, if you get days off from clinic and you can do that, absolutely. NYU is pretty strict about that. So I tried when I was applying to coordinate when we were on breaks to shadow different programs. Then again, interview season for match GPR programs typically occur in November and December because their deadlines for their applications is usually about November, somewhere between November 1st and December 15th. And then for AEGD, USGPR, OMS, OMFS, and PEDS programs that participate in match, you must have your match lists submitted by January 8th. For people who are applying to ortho, perio, pros, anesthesiology, or Canada, who again participate in the match program, your match lists have to be submitted by November 13th. They just have different days in which they have match day. It's again, based on what program you're applying for, definitely look at the ADEA PASS website for deadlines because it's very, very variant based on the type of program that you're applying to. For those, again, for the second match submissions, so your AEGDs, your GPRs, your OMS, and PEDS that participate in match, match day is typically late January, and then as soon as that match day occurs, anywhere as far as April sometimes for GPRs, is your post-match season. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. Definitely when you're, preparing to go through the cycle for residency, you need to consider finances. A lot of times, especially I was talking with students from Touro because I'm right by there. They didn't really mention the finance part of it and having, people who are very dependent upon their student loans for, financing everything as far as their dental school education goes. Make sure you take that in your applying for residency into account when you're considering the amount of loan money you take out. If you take the maximum already, well, then that's, already kind of straightforward. But if you don't typically take the full amount, make sure that you're kind of factoring an amount of money that you want to take out for the application process. So keep in mind when you take money out for your loans, say you say, I want to take out $100,000 of loans, they're going to disperse $50,000 for your fall semester and $50,000 for your spring semester. So if you anticipate that all your finances for your residency programs will cost you about $5,000, then I would say you want to request $10,000 because most of this money you're going to spend during that kind of fall summer season. So you want that full $5,000 during your residency application process. And then once your spring disbursement is dispersed, if there's extra money left over you don't need, you can always return it without any kind of penalties for that. You can always return money. You have like the first, I think 30 days or something to return any money you don't want. That's in that disbursement. So keep that in mind. I think that's very important when preparing for an application cycle. Keep in mind about, I did some, you know, I didn't look through every program obviously, but it seemed pretty consistently that application fee per program is runs you about $195 this cycle. The match, if your programs participate in match, that's a separate fee to participate in the match algorithm. That's a $95 fee. Sometimes, you know, depending on what you said to where your scores for your boards part 1 and 2 to be sent, sometimes you have to pay a fee associated with getting those scores uploaded. And then again, some, you know, institutions vary on the costs if you're requesting certain types of transcripts, so keep that in mind. And then if you have to invest in wardrobe or transportation or accommodation for interviews, depending on how far you have to travel for those programs you're applying to. For researching programs, the ADEA website is a great, their search engine is a great place to start, I think. It has over 700 programs on their website, and you can search via a specific program name, program type. You can go program type and by the state, and then it gives you links to all the programs' websites, their contact information for their directors, and then kind of gives you an overview of the program objectives and requirements. Some programs who don't participate in the ADEA PASS or the match programs aren't necessarily listed on the ADEA PASS website. So sometimes you can also go to the specialty society associations based on what specialty you're interested in to find out all the programs available in the country. And then also Ignite DDS has come out with a GPR booklet. It's not comprehensive. They're constantly adding to it. I actually just added New York Medical College to their table of contents and the programs that they go through. But it's very nice if your program is included in there, and you know, it gives you things by the numbers, kinds of experiences you have, and these are all filled out based on people who've participated in the program. So if if your program's listed in there, it's amazing, and it gives you some really great just like quick facts, but it also just gives you some good general information about like what residency should you apply to, why would you want to do a residency, how to prepare for that, and then some firsthand accounts. So it's a good resource, and I'm pretty sure it's free to dental students, so certainly something to check out. And then some other resources that I found that are really helpful if you still want like a very broken down, very specific differences between AUGD and GPR. UCSF has a really good comparison of the two, as well as hunterspence.com. I found is a really very laid out black and white. These are the differences. So I definitely suggest if you're considering whether to do AUGD or GPR, if you're going to apply to both types of programs, these give you some very good comparisons of the differences. And then also, when preparing your application, putting your best foot forward. As does Career Compass has some great resources, including there's a archived webinar called Postgraduate Applications Through the Eyes of Program Faculty, and that link is right here. And then again, if you need some help with your CV or resume, they've got some great links and resources there as well. Something to consider when, if you're considering a GPR, is not all on-call is created equal. There are some programs that don't have any on-call, and then there's other programs that their on-call experience will vary based on the level of trauma center that program hospital is located in. For instance, I'm in a level 1 trauma center, so we have every single specialty on site, on call at 24 hours, 365 days a year. So for me, when I'm on call, I have to be on campus. For me, I live on campus because I was very fortunate to get on-campus housing through my residency. It's not common for dental residencies to have that. I was a rare in the lottery. I got it. But for those of my co-residents that don't have residency housing, they have an on-call room that they sleep in, much like this kid here in this picture. Level 2 trauma centers, they have most critical services on site, but then all other services like dental would be classified as other services, are at least in 20-minute radius. So if you're in a level 2 trauma center, you just have to live within a 20-minute radius of the hospital. So if you get called in on your pager, you can be there within 20 minutes to evaluate a patient. And then level 3 is even lower of services covered and like level of complicated cases that the hospital handles. For instance, my program has actually one of each. So we have Metropolitan Hospital, that's a level 2, and then we have Phelps Memorial, which is in Tarrytown, New York, which is a level 3. So those residents, like, they actually take call weeks at a time because they so rarely get called in for anything, because most of the patients are actually coming to Westchester, where we have a full range of services for dental in the emergency room comparatively. So level 3, it's pretty much like you forget you're on call basically, because you very rarely remember that, or very rarely get called, and you take it from home. And then again, based on the level of trauma center, sometimes that will vary upon what kinds of cases that you will see as a dental resident. For me, I'm at a level 1 trauma center, and despite the fact we also have an oral surgery program here, we still serve as like the frontline evaluator. It's between me and my other 2 general practice residents, and we typically have one other, like either 1st through 3rd year oral surgery resident that the 4 of us rotate who takes call. So at our hospital, like I do dental trauma, like, you know, a kid flips over his bicycle and has a bunch of trauma to his teeth. We have dental infections, like this patient right here, but then we also do lax. So I've had this kid was, had an incident with a chainsaw. This patient was slashed with a box cutter. So like I was the person who actually took the call, and I not only took the call, but I actually sutured those patients' clothes. So based on the level of trauma center, and again, based on how GPR program is structured on who will actually perform treatment in the emergency room, is very variable. So it's definitely something you want to ask when doing research on programs. So the application process, they've now made it very similar to how the application for dental school looks. This literally is like a mirror image of what the application for dental school now looks like. So you've got every section has the same kind of information. So your personal information is like your name, your address, things of that nature. Academic history has, it wants your transcripts, and it wants your test scores and things like that. Supporting information, that's your, upload your experiences, upload your achievements, upload your institution evaluation, your letters of recommendation, and things of that nature. And then program materials is any kind of supplemental application materials or questions that a program that you're applying to may ask for. One additional thing in the personal information section for the ADEA PASS application is a portion where it says match. And we'll get into that in the next slide. Actually, it's one more slide. So we'll go over what that section for match looks like within the ADEA PASS application. But first, for an application through ADEA PASS to be considered completed, therefore being distributed to residency programs, you have to have all the program requirements completed. Any additional materials, supplemental materials that asked for should be submitted and uploaded. Your application is again submitted, and all the payments for all your applications are received. All your official dental school transcripts or evaluations are received. Your 3 professional evaluation forms, your institutional evaluation form, all these things have to be uploaded and submitted in order for you for your application to be sent to your programs. And then going back again for match, you have to register every single program, regardless of it only participating in ADEA PASS or participating in the match system, has to fill out the ADEA PASS. But if your program also participates in match, then you have to go to the match the match website, which is listed here, and then press this register for the dental match now. It will give you, you'll ask you to create a username, a password, and again, pay that $95 fee. And then at the conclusion of you registering, it's gonna give you a 5-digit application code number, which you will then take and put in the match section of your ADEA PASS application right here. This is literally a screenshot of what that section of the personal information page looks like on the ADEA PASS application to put your match code right in here. So if you want to get a kind of a better idea of what match is and how that algorithm works, again, I suggest using this link. It will take you to this video as well as like some other information about Match. So Match isn't an application. Match is an algorithm and a system for matching applicants to programs. So that's why you still have to fill out the ADEA PASS application, and that's what gets sent to your programs that participate in Match. But the programs that participate in Match want Match, the company, to help them match residents to their program. So what happens is that once you go through all your interviews and you're coming upon the submit your match list deadline, all the programs that you interviewed at, you then have an opportunity to rank them. And you're gonna rank them from your first choice to however many places you interviewed. Again, if you interview at some place and you don't like the program and you say to yourself, if this was the only program I got into, I would absolutely hate it, you don't have to list it in your ranking. You can just choose to omit it completely if you don't like that program. And I've suggested that to people. It's like, if that was the only program you matched to and you know you would hate it, then don't even put it. So what it does, so you put your rank order lists and then the programs put their rank order lists, and then Match through an algorithm tries to match everybody to a program. And it always says, remember, you will be matched the most preferred program on your rank order list that ranks you and does not fill all its available positions with applicants it prefers. So this video really goes into really nicely how, kind of breaking down how that algorithm works. So for instance, in this scenario that's kind of illustrated here, program B, they have like what they call tentative matches. So they were going throughout the program was going through people's applications, and Abel over here actually had program B listed as his number 1. And so initially during this process, Abel was actually put into program B, but then once the match program got to Charles' application, they noticed that Charles put program B as his number 1 choice, and that the program B had ranked Charles number 1. So because Charles was listed number 1 and they only take 1 resident, they then booted Abel out of the spot and they put Charles in the spot. And then the program goes back to look at Abel's program choices and notice his second choice was program A, and program A had listed Abel as number 3, and they had put Baker as number 2, and Baker listed program A as his number 1 choice, but they had 2 positions. So because Charles, had already been placed at his number 1 choice, and program A was still looking for a second person to fill its position based on where Abel put program A and where program A put Abel, he was then put into his number 2 choice. So like I said, it may sound confusing, but if you watch this video and go to this website where all the resources explain how the algorithm works, it makes sense and it gives you some tips and goes through some myths and miscommunications about the match process. So then there's post-match. That typically starts, the post-match process happens on the day of match. So what happens? So say for instance, the 25th of January is slated as match day. Typically either several days or a week before match day, you will get an email from Match saying whether or not you've been placed in a program. You won't get which program you've been placed in, but you will say you have matched somewhere. So then on the 25th, if you got an email a week prior or so that said you matched, you'll find out where you matched. If, however, a week or so before the match day, you were told you have not matched, the day of match day, so that 25th, again, I just put out a random date in January. On that day, on match day, when other people are finding out where they matched, at 12 p.m. on match day, the Match website will list all the programs with open spots. So this is pretty much like open season, kind of like on Black Friday in November. So, my suggestion is get a team of people. If you find out that you did not match somewhere and you're going to try and do a post match, get a team of people together. So when all those programs are listed, you can find out the director's name, the phone number. Sometimes there's inaccurate information, so you actually have to go to the program's website directly because ADEA PASS or Match have inaccurate information. And then, start sending emails saying like, hi, my name is Katie. I am interested in one of your post-match slots, and maybe even include your resume and your personal statement on there, and then in the attachments. And then if they're interested, they'll typically give you a call or send you an email to set up a phone interview, and then kind of go from there. Oftentimes they are going to interview over the phone, or probably via Zoom or Skype now that we have these technologies available. They're still going to interview several people because there's a mad dash for people to take these very limited slots. But if they like you, they will then offer you a position. For oral surgery, sometimes when people find out that they don't get in to match to an oral surgery program, and sometimes for post-match, there are no spots available. I can't say as I can recall any time that's happened, but sometimes it could happen. So oral surgery, people can also consider doing internship years at hospitals. A lot of programs that have the oral surgery programs also take interns. So it's kind of like you basically do the same things or similar things that a first-year oral surgery resident is doing, but you are just an intern. And it doesn't count towards your, 4-year program if you're going to do it a hospital-based program. But at least it's something to put on your application to make you a stronger applicant and give you exposure to OR cases and other, more advanced extraction cases. And then often, especially in New York, because there are so many programs in this city, and based on how people play their cards, even as late as April and May, a lot of your schools will get contacted. I know NYU got contacted because we have connections with a lot of GPR directors being like, hey, we had someone dropped out, or like, hey, we still have an open slot in our program. If you have any students who are considering or looking for a program, let us know and send their information, have them reach out to us. So oftentimes, specialty programs, definitely a mad dash the day of match day to fill those post-match slots. But for GPR, sometimes there can kind of trickle in as you get closer and closer to graduation. And then I know some people who didn't go through, the ADEA PASS or Match program at all, and they just waited for post-match and then just called programs like that without, doing anything or spending any money, and they got spots that way. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that as a first choice, but sometimes people are not quite sure when this whole process is going on, and then all of a sudden it's March or it's February and you're like, oh my gosh, actually I really want to do GPR. I don't want to go to private practice or do some, go right into, doing clinical dentistry by myself. So there are opportunities to do that even if you didn't go through this whole process prior. But I certainly, wouldn't necessarily bank on that depending on the year in the cycle. So I have other things, but I want, opportunity for everyone to ask questions and for the other panelists to talk about their experiences. So at this point, I'm going to stop share from my screen, but if there are questions that come up that relate to some of the slides, I might reshare. But again, there's a whole appendix of other slides going through personal statements, interviewing, shadowing, and some other things you kind of want to ask yourself when thinking about applying to programs that will be included in the appendix of this slide deck.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie, for that presentation. We're gonna go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we have. And for our panelists, if 2 or 3 people wanna answer, that would be great. So I'm gonna actually skip some of the questions because they have been covered. But for anyone that wants to answer, how did you decide to pursue your residency or your specific specialty? And was there a specific moment or culmination of experiences that led you to your decision? Whoever wants to take that.
Okay, I can go first. So I chose orthodontics, and I actually knew that I was interested in this before coming to dental school because I had shadowed and worked in an orthodontist office beforehand. So I would say the experience that kind of got me started was shadowing. So if you're not really sure, what I would recommend is either contacting different specialties or general dentists in your area when things start opening up again and seeing if you can shadow them there, or even in your dental school, just go to the specialty floor during your off time and check out the different programs and hang out with the residents. They're all very helpful and would love for you to come up at any time.
I'll answer that one as well. So for me, I kind of went in with the mentality that I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I'm just going to work hard and try to build up a resume anyway and check all the boxes I would need once I figure out if I do or don't want to specialize. And then I had a really good friend who got into perio, and I always kept in touch with him because he was a D4 when I was a D1, and then he is now a resident at NYU, so he was always really accessible. Vinny Baga, if anyone knows him, he's awesome, and he was just always so very open about his experiences. He didn't really hold back or sugarcoat things. And on top of that, so this was at the end of D2 when I really started talking to him more about the specialty. But then on top of that, in D3, NYU requires that you do a 1-week rotation in perio, and you're with the residents all day, every day for those 5 days. And that was my aha moment, absolutely, like 100%, because that's when you really got to see, it's not just the joking, Shiv, this is for you, but gum gardeners, they're going to be, doing the really sick surgeries. I mean, I was obsessed the moment I started seeing what they really can get into. And then, like the geeky part about it, but it really is understanding, well, I guess this is getting really like perio specific, but I'll wrap it up with this. I love that it's something that really makes you focus in on the biology and the medicine that goes with dentistry, because I feel like sometimes you have these jokes about, dentistry kind of being more of a, what's the right way to put it? More just like a technique. Exactly, right. And then you lose the science and the medicine behind it. And I think perio doesn't do that. I think they are very good about always intertwining the two and understanding and respecting it. So yeah, that's why I chose perio.
Nancy, do you want to go over like why you chose AEGD versus a GPR?
Yeah, sure. Yes. So I went into the application process knowing that I wanted to do general dentistry, that it wasn't a stepping stone to a specialty necessarily, but I wanted to be a general dentist. And I love that about general dentistry is because you can choose, there's like the autonomy to choose what you want to do and kind of pick the type of cases that you want to pursue. If you want to do a little more endo, you want to do a little more perio, if you want to, extract teeth, you have that option. I love that. I love like mixing and matching. There wasn't one field that I gravitated towards or against in dental school. We were lucky that in our school, we had access to the specialties on site. And so we did rotations and we got that exposure. And I still couldn't decide which specialty, but I really liked general dentistry and having that rapport with patients over time. So I went in knowing that. There are a few factors I was looking for when I was trying to figure out AEGD or GPR programs. And to be very honest, I was so sure I would do a GPR program in New York and New Jersey. And I ended up doing, obviously, AEGD in San Antonio, non-match, which was completely kind of not what I expected. How I decided, though, was that I knew I wanted a few things. A great atmosphere. So I wanted amazing faculty, really happy residents. I wanted a good life in residency. I wanted post-sales good life to be really good. So I cared about that a lot. And then I wanted a program that would really help me grow clinically, become confident in as many areas in dentistry as possible. So I wanted a comprehensive care program and a big hospital program. I also cared about medically complex care and wanted some emergency experiences. I did not want anything as intense as what Katie did in terms of like a heavy on-call. I wanted light to medium on-call, but I still wanted experience in how to approach emergency situations, not panicking and having the cops do that. And so my AG program is different in that it does have an on-call actually portion, but we see patients on our rosters. So patients that we all treat, it's a big program, so there are a lot of patients. We see those patients who come in for emergency patients, so it's not open to kind of everyone necessarily, that on-call one for the AGD portion of things, but at least I get that aspect of it. And so that's kind of how I chose my AGD program, but I did go in feeling that GPR was a really good program for me.
Okay, thank you. So for our next question, are there any specific requirements for your GPR, AEGD, or specialty, such as ADAT, GREs, any sort of standardized testing like that?
For OS, it's really just the CBSE and then the regular MBZE exams.
For ortho, it's the GRE.
And
For,
honestly, go ahead.
I was just gonna say for perio, it's very much still a recommended but not required scenario for GRE or ADAT. I personally I opted not to take either just because it wasn't necessary. So that was my reasoning.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, more, it's not even specialty specific as far as the ADAT goes. It's really like program specific. I think I can't think of any offhand. It doesn't mean they aren't out there that like absolutely require the ADAT. I think pretty much every ortho program still requires the GRE, and then obviously OMF is always going to require the CVSE. But definitely, if you're thinking of any type of specialty programs, it's really important to look at the programs you're interested in, and then kind of go from there, I think.
Okay. So for people that have applied to specialties, phase 1, for phase 1 residents, did you apply to a specialty and GPR at the same time? What was your plan B if you did not match into phase 1 specialty?
So I only applied to orthodontics. I applied to a lot of schools. I applied to 13. And so I was just really hoping that I would match. And then actually it might have even been 15. I asked my the person who helped us apply, and they said it was a good amount. And I guess if I didn't, I would try and post match or reapply the following year. And since I did phase 1, you can always apply for GPR after, because that's phase 2.
Yeah, I don't know how true it is, but you do hear that sometimes programs will get a little skeptical about knowing if you did apply to GPR and a specialty. Again, that's like kind of rumored, and I understand it as well from a director's perspective. So I only stuck to pair programs. My plan was always to apply for GPR if I was in a situation where I didn't match.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's similar in the sense too, with like applying to match versus like match programs for GPR or AGD programs, or programs that only participate in PASS. So if you want to apply, if there's some of your like top choices are ADEA PASS only, I say like apply to those only first, and then see if you get interviews, and then following the interview within 72 hours, you're going to know if you got in. And usually whether or not you got into one of your ADEA PASS only programs prior to when the GPR match program deadlines occur. So, if you like an ADEA PASS only program and you get into it, then you've just saved yourself a bunch of time and money on applying to match programs that you don't have to, worry about, because it's phase 2. It happens later in the process. That happened with Nancy. We actually had a conversation about it when she was going through the process. And she's like, I really love San Antonio. So I was like, well, why don't you just go through that first? And if you got in, you would go there, then you don't have to apply to your match programs and deal with all the expense, because $195 per program is expensive. So that's another thing too. If you're only doing general dentistry, strategy as well, that works too.
Okay. So, do you guys have any advice? Let's say people are interested in applying to phase 1 and phase 2, how we should go about personal statements and letters of rec? Like, are they just writing it for your specialty, or are they also doing it for general, or how does that work?
I guess I can take this question. Technically I applied to 2 different types of programs at the same time, because the one program I'm currently in is a GPR with a master's in public health, and then the other programs I applied to were only GPRs. So actually, I forgot to go through this when going over the application, but you can actually upload different letters of recommendation, upload different personal statements and other things. I think those are the only 2 things. So you can upload different personal statements, and you can upload different letters of recommendation and send them to different institutions. So I wrote a personal statement that was specifically geared towards why I wanted to do a master's in public health to that program. And then I sent a completely different personal statement to just the GPR only programs. So that was a way you can apply to different types of programs, and you don't need 2 different ADEA PASS accounts, if that makes sense.
Okay. Do you guys have tips to keep in mind for writing our CVs and personal statements, and maybe some resources that you might have used?
So I use this online website called Canva, CANVA, .com. I'll write it in the chat. Oops, that was privately to somebody. But it's really, really great for formatting, and you can make it your resume just looks so professional and so nice. So I would really recommend using that. And then for your personal statement, I would just make sure as many people as possible that you trust read it and give you advice. And I kind of use similar formatting from my dental school one to just kind of help me, get a framework. And then I applied these concepts from dental school into that.
Okay.
Yeah. Something else I'd add to that. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I would just obviously talk about why you want to do the specialty you're applying to, but also write about other stuff that makes you stand out, because that's honestly the personal statement. They'll bring up whatever you write in that just as a conversation starter. And you want to stand out. So just write something, I think, about something that's special, specifically to you.
I totally agree with that. And then on top of that, I feel like it's really easy for us to take advantage of what you have in the moment. So by that, I mean, when ASA or any other club for that matter is hosting a CV workshop, a personal statement workshop, regardless of you being a first year or fourth year, you're sitting in that room, start the skeleton, start taking those tips and build it up, because you're going to have, and obviously just constantly save it on a Google Drive. It's always there for you. And then when it's time to apply, in my case, that's what I had done. And it was thankfully a very easy experience, whereas some of my other colleagues were very stressed out about that part and sending it to 8 million people to, get read-throughs. And I think we have a lot of good resources for you guys, and, start as soon as you can, because that can be a little overwhelming. But when you have those tools already with you in the moment, that's when you're going to use it most effectively versus trying to go back 2 years ago to old notes. So.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I posted a link to on the ASA website on writing your CV, and I love Dr. Colleen Green's eloquence in elaborating on how to write CVs. I always kind of watch hers first to kind of jumpstart myself in editing or revising my CV. I think it's so important to be concise in your CV. I spend a lot of time trying to find the right action verbs, trying to say more and less. When program directors look at it, they're not spending 10 minutes on your CV sometimes, sometimes just a few minutes, a quick glance to get a sense of who you are, and first impressions are made. So I definitely recommend that not only do you give someone else to read your personal statement of serving and trust, but also give that person to read your CV as well. Like have them look through it and make sure they understand it, because sometimes things that are really obvious in your head won't be obvious to someone else who didn't experience what you went through. And another thing I went through my CV for was, if there are areas where, for instance, you fundraise a certain amount of money, or you did a certain number of hours externing, I would be very specific in those details, especially something you're very proud of. Like let them know that you planned this many events with this much attendance, you increased by this percent. Like if you could provide a little bit of that, and even your extracurricular activity session, it's so nice for standing out. I think like program directors feel like if I was looking at a CV, my eyes would go straight to like, okay, let's look at some concrete things that you did, instead of something generic that you can find on the website explaining what a club is. What did you do personally to contribute to that club's success? So that's the lens that I would suggest in terms of trying to kind of stand out among thousands of applicants.
Okay, thank you guys. So on the topic of the timeline for submitting applications for a competitive applicant, do you recommend submitting more towards the deadline, or do residency applications work on a rolling admissions basis? And do schools have extensive supplemental applications as well?
I'll hop in on this one a little bit. I mean, the deadlines are hard deadlines. If you don't get your application in by your program deadline, like forget it. If you put it, it's kind of like the same, somewhat of a same sense of dental school. Like if you submit it earlier, your name gets at like closer to the top of the pile. But with residency, they don't necessarily start looking at the applications until, the deadline submission date. So, you'll be at the top of the pile, but like if you, for instance, your deadline was like, I don't know, August 1st and you submitted July 1st, don't expect to hear from that program about an interview offer until after August 1st. But your application's more likely to be closer to the top of the pile and be seen first, when they're looking at that finite amount of people they interview for, if you apply earlier. For me, when I did shadowing, two of the programs I shadowed during my August break. So I tried to get my application submitted before I shadowed, so that when I went to shadow, I could confirm that they received my application, just to show that like I'm on top of it. I'm really interested in your program and want to make sure that you know who I am, kind of thing, even though their deadlines weren't until I think either September or October. But it's not like I didn't get notified any sooner about whether or not I was going to get an interview. So I don't know if anyone.
I agree with that. Also, I only applied to 4-year OMFS programs, but the supplement was usually just a fee, of course. But then I guess for some 6-year programs, I heard that there were like supplemental questions.
Okay.
I would say just a note about that. It is hard to get everything in by well in advance of the deadline, because if you need to send your board scores and your dean's letter, there's different ways that your application in totality may be delayed. But it's so important to, like, for me, in my personal experience, to reach out to the directors of the program to let them know of your interest, especially during like COVID time, wherein extensions might not be possible, right, for all of you, taking trips out of your clinic schedule when that was all delayed, and then trying to visit programs where there's so many precautions, that might not be as feasible to do as many externships as we could have done last year, for instance. So it's so important to let them know of your interest. And one way to let them know is to write, a little something to the program director, let them know of your interest, ask meaningful questions, and then follow up with them with the acceptance of different materials in your application. I would say sometimes when you reach out to program, actually often in my experience, you may not reach the program director directly. Like you'll reach the logistics person or the affairs person, and that's when your interview is starting. Like you should be absolutely professional in all your communication and realize that like every communication that you reach out to them with, whether it's in person or electronic, will reflect on you. So you want to be extra careful, kind of write your emails meaningfully, Send thank you letters at the end. Like that goes without saying. You should always, thank them for their time and everything. For supplemental information, I was actually surprised with some of the programs I wanted to apply to, that they actually had supplemental questions on their website that weren't as clear on Program Pass. That might be updated since the Program Pass or the program pages for ADEA gets upgraded every year. But for instance, my program that had a whole supplemental application that I could only find from their website. And then there, for instance, like Hackensack in New Jersey, their GPR program had like a separate letter of interest that you had to submit to them directly. So I would be very organized and just make sure you go through the right channels to find out if you're missing anything, or if there are supplemental questions that Program Pass or like a Program ADEA, the Pages website didn't reflect initially for you.
Got it. Okay, I'm just gonna run through the chat for some of the questions that we have. Is there another application fee when going through post-match?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It's kind of like, it's not really a formal application process post-match. It's like a free-for-all kind of thing where you're contacting programs directly and trying to get spots. So there's no cost associated with it.
And is it possible for someone to get post-match into a place that they did not originally apply for?
Absolutely. I have a friend who, gosh, what was she applying for? I think Perio, actually. She didn't match any programs, and there was one post-match spot in Oklahoma that she definitely never applied to during her actual application, and that's where she ended up going. So once the post-match process occurs, it's open. Everything is open to everybody again.
Question, if a program is both match and pass, how do programs balance how many slots go to match and how many slots go straight to non-match, and telling people 2 days after their interview? I think for this question, it's that non-match is a lot earlier than match, right? Like,
I'm not aware of any programs that do both, like every single, I shouldn't say every single because that's a wrong statement as well, but pretty much if a program is match, that is the route in which they select their applicants. But if a program does not participate in match, then that's how they select their applicants. They just do it themselves and hand select people. It's not like an algorithm that brings people together. My program is a little different, at least for mine, because like for me, for the MPH GPR program, the rest of New York Medical College, if you're just doing the GPR, it exclusively goes through match. But if you express interest during the application process that you want to be considered for the GPR MPH program, then you get put into the ADEA PASS process, and you get interviewed before everybody else in like October, November, and then I got notified 2 days after, because for me, I get to pick my locations for the 2 years, because typically if you're just doing the 1-year program through New York Medical College, you either designate, I want to do Metropolitan Hospital, I want to do Westchester Medical Center, or I want to do Open Door. So for me, based on what I choose from where I want to divide my 2 years, that takes up spots during 2 different application cycles. So they have to be aware, like I chose Westchester Medical Center, so when they started interviewing people that were going through match, they knew that they only had 2 slots they were looking to fill as opposed to the 3 slots. And then during this just past application cycle, I'm doing my 2nd year at Phelps, so they knew they had 11 slots to fill as opposed to the normal 12. I'm not sure if there's other like specialty programs that go through both routes, but typically it's like everyone has to fill out typically the ADEA PASS application, and then if your program selects applicants through match, then you have to pay the match to then, because that's where you go to then make your match list. But that the program looks at your ADEA PASS application.
okay.
And did you have anything to add?
Let's see. All right, so what are some important red flags to look out for when researching residency programs? I know Alli mentioned happiness of the residents. So if you do have a chance to go visit or during your interview, do you guys have anything else?
I can jump in. There are some questions that you want to ask residents and then others that you want to ask program directors, right? You have to be very choosy about which questions you ask. Talking to current residents or even just recently graduate residents, that was the most valuable thing that I did during this process. They will be very honest with you, especially if they came from your school, if you got a lot of school pride, like they will tell you the full scope of what they have experienced. So if you kind of contact them around this time, actually it's a pretty good time, they're towards the end of their program, they can actually give you a really good view of the program. You do want to ask them how happy they are. Just like what Alli said, like I agree, like I wanted to have a good time in residency and not, go through a tough time, like managing like politics in the office, or if there was a, they just lost a bunch of assistants, or if there were some big changes that were underway, that would not be reflected in doing the online search, right? Like the current residents are the ones that will be able to give you that inside scoop. Also things like some programs that I looked into had like morning and night hours for the daytime hours. It was like a little bit, it was different from your typical like 9 to 4, 9 to 5. They had like a night shift that wasn't like, it wasn't on call or anything. It was just part of the scheduling. So like if that matters to you, if you have, say like a family go back to, or you don't want to do night shift, like that's something lifestyle wise that you can really distinguish different programs by. Also for GPAR AED programs, things like, is it program comprehensive care based or is it procedural based? I didn't realize the difference between those, to be honest, until I was interviewing some residents, asking them about their experience. But I ended up realizing that I really like a comprehensive care program. But there are some perks to a procedure-based program if you want that kind of atmosphere. So those are some of the things, and also the on-call situation. That's the clearest when you ask the resident about like what that means for them. The other thing is that ask about the whether the program structure includes a ton of didactics, a ton of rotations, a ton of clinical dentistry. Like what's the proportion? Some programs half of the year you'll be on rotation. Some people might be looking for that experience. I know I wanted experience with a lot of clinical dentistry where I was doing, comprehensive care for my patients. So that might also distinguish some programs over others. And also insurance, like what kind of patients they're looking for. Are they mainly Medicaid based? Are they accepting private and out of pocket? Those are some good questions to get a sense of like who you'll be dealing with when you're actually in the program.
I think red flags for a program is extremely personal as far as what you're looking for from a program. So for instance, like my program, specifically my location, like we really don't do that much endo. We do some, we do anterior endo, but most of our posterior endo gets like referred out to an endodontist. Or like we don't do that many perio surgeries. Or like some programs, one of our locations, Metropolitan Hospital, like you walk into it and you feel like you walked into like the 1980s as far as like, the state of the art of their equipment. So I think those types of things, like the red flags of a program, really depends on like, what are you looking for from a program?
I was gonna type this up, but I'll just say it really quickly. One last thing I'll say is also, if you have the opportunity to shadow in the clinic that day, do so obviously, but really pay attention to what procedures they're doing, find out what year they're in, how many times they've had to do it, and then also look at how they interact with the faculty. Does it seem like there's some tension there? Are they able to like joke? Is it a healthy relationship where you don't feel like you're being talked down to, but communicating with and learning how to think through the process? I think those are big pluses, because if they're not doing a lot of the things that you want to be doing, then, obviously you have to take a step back and reevaluate where you should be going.
Got it. All right. Well, at this point, since it's a little bit over 6:30, we're gonna wrap it up here. But if you guys just want to take a look at the chat, there's a lot of our questions have been answered by the panelists, and also resources. If you guys have any questions, you can email me and I will get in touch with panelists to try to provide resources for you guys. But on that note, thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time out. And like Michelle said, we're gonna post this up on our YouTube page for this recording, so you guys can always come back and look into this. But thank you so much to our panelists, and good luck on your residencies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks, guys.
Thank
Tamara.
you,
Thank you. Good luck,
Nancy,
everyone.
Allison, Katie, Jesse, and Allie.
Good luck.
Thank you.